All right. Hi, friends. I'm Rachel Gilmore, the Director of New and Vital Faith here in the Desert Southwest Conference, coming to you with a pre-recorded Monday Moments for the first time. I'm sorry, I am out of town in Syracuse at a national developer orientation with other annual conferences. So I can't do this live and in person, but it's really important data. I want to make sure that you get a hold of it. So without further ado, let me share screen here and hit play, and we will dive into how we can reach younger generations, the do's, the don'ts, and the whys. Okay, so younger generation, what generations are we talking about here? That's an excellent question. We are going to look at millennials who are, 42 to like 29, Gen Z, who are about 14 to 28, and Gen Alpha, who are birth to age 13. Obviously, we don't know too much about what infants want in church, but Gen Alpha as a generation is revealing some interesting things. Okay, so I wanted to start off by sharing a really cool infographic from Mark McCrindle's company. McCrindle is a social analyst and a demographer in Australia. And so he uses pictures to help show us how radically things have changed from generation to generation, right? So we begin with the builder generation, born in 1925 to 1945. Their iconic toys were roller skates. They listened to music on a record player. When it came to leadership styles, the leader would kind of control the team. And if they wanted to be entertained, they went to the movies. Then you look at boomers. They were playing with Frisbees. Music became slightly more mobile with audio cassettes. In terms of leadership, the leader would direct the team and they could watch consume entertainment from the comfort of their own home with the television. Then we move into Gen X, also known as the forgotten generation, who played with Rubik's Cubes, could take their music outside of their home or boombox in a Walkman and begin to personalize the music that you listen to instead of it being in a shared space. Leaders would coordinate amongst the team, and we got our VHS tapes, right, with our VCRs. So for the first time, you didn't have to watch according to a schedule. You actually could start to decide when you wanted to watch something, if Blockbuster had the tape or the movie that you wanted to watch, right? Okay, so then we move into Generation Y, also known as the millennial generation. Iconic toys are the BMX bike. Now, instead of having a Walkman, we have iPods, which came around in 2001. Leaders guide the team, so you see more of that mentorship element, relational element. And for the first time, we have internet. So now we can access information whenever we want to. We can go to YouTube and watch what we want when we want to without having to worry about VHS tapes, right? So we move on to Generation Z. Folding scooters, Spotify. So now instead of just the music that you buy or download to your device or the tape you put in your Walkman, you can access any song you want to or podcast anytime, anywhere. And see how the leadership structure has changed. So for the first time, you have a big L and little L. So leaders are there to empower and make little leaders. Everybody is a leader or has a task or role to accomplish on the team. And we have our portable devices where now when we want to be entertained, we can watch even without a computer, right? You pull out your tablet on a plane or wherever you're going and can access it. And then our youngest generation here, they have fidget spinners, which I think is indicative of the fact that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are digital native generations. So their attention span can sometimes be shorter. It's more difficult. And fidget spinners can help with ADHD. They can help with anxiety. Because again, Gen A more than any other generation has had access to everything at all times with the internet. They're born and raised. I mean, my Gen Alpha daughter for her third quarter presentation had to make a website and a blog, and it was so easy for her, right? She has 16,000 followers on our family TikTok because she has hundreds of drafts, right? She just naturally knows how to shape and utilize apps and technology for her own end game. And so leadership now, instead of the leader influencing or empowering, they inspire the team, and there's more equity is what they're looking for and expecting in a team environment. And they can stream, right? So it's not one device, they can stream anytime from anywhere to be entertained. So totally different shift, right? From my grandma who had to go and pay a quarter, 50 cents to go to the movies when she was growing up as a kid to what my kids are experiencing. So Why do we need to reach these younger generations? Because they are not in our pews anymore. All right. So Barna did some research in 2019 that found that church dropouts among our 18 to 29-year-olds, so this is basically our Gen Z folks, has gone from 59% leaving in 2011 to 64%. So they are leaving our churches. And this I found fascinating. Okay, this came from the American National Family Life Survey in December of 2021, because in my mind, we always heard that, yes, okay, fine, young adults will leave the church when they go off to college, but then they'll have kids and they'll come back. Well, they're not leaving the faith or deciding to leave church entirely when they're out of the home. They decide even earlier. Okay, so according to their research, almost 75% of 18 to 29-year-olds who end up leaving the church make the decision to leave before they're 18. That's why I'm including information here on our Gen Alphas, because if we don't reach them and show them that church has a value for them in their life before they're 18, they're not coming back. And the New York Times had an article in June of 2023 that talked about how 40 million people have left the church in the last 25 years. So we have about 4 million worshipers under 40, 40 million have left. Like, we have work to do, right? Okay. And most Gen Zers do not believe it's necessary to raise children in a religion. So if you look at the demographics generations over time, the silent generation, 76% of them thought it's important to raise your kids in church. Boomers, 68%, Gen X, 60%, millennials, 50%, Gen Z, 40%. So now the majority of Gen Z kids, when they grow up, are not expecting to go back to church and bring their children someday. So, okay, are we ready? We feeling inspired? Top 3 reasons why these young adults are leaving. Number 1, the church doesn't share their values. Number 2, there's no impact on their daily life. And number 3, there's been a decline in trust of clergy and organized religion in general. Okay, so let's look into the data that led me to offer these 3 reasons to you. Okay, this comes from Springtide Research. If you've never checked out Springtide's resources, you definitely need to. Most of their research centers on Gen Z. In 2021, they asked a large data group of folks in that generation what they care about and what they think the church cares about. So if you look at this graph up here, when it comes to like LGBTQIA plus rights, 71% of Gen Z kids care about these rights. And they think only 44% of Christians or people in the church or churches care about it. So that's a pretty big disparity, right? 27%, they don't think that the majority of churches care about what they do. Gender equity, still quite a big gap there. 77% of Gen Z really care about this, and they only think about 52% of churches do. Immigration rights, 77% versus 54%. Income inequality, 76% compared to 53%. Disability rights, 80% compared to 58%. Environmental causes, reproductive rights, 75% to 54%. Racial justice, 81% to 60%. So they really don't think the vast majority of churches anywhere really care about and value the things that they do. 86% of teens value standing up for justice, and 3 in 4 teens have taken action against racism, according to a 2020 National 4-H Council survey. And a YouBo poll of almost 40,000 Gen Zers found that 88% believe Black Americans are treated differently from others. I would have thought it might have been higher, and 90% support the Black Lives Matter movement. So again, they're out there, they're protesting, they believe in these things, and they don't think the church does. When it comes to the climate, 69% of Gen Z feel anxious about the future. According to some Pew research from May of 2021, my hunch is these numbers have even gone up since then. And you compare, like, almost 70% of Gen Z are anxious about climate change. 60% of millennials are. 46%, so less than half of Gen X, 41% of baby boomers. And I thought this was fascinating. 93% of Gen Zers say that brands have an obligation to take a stand on environmental issues. So if you talk to a lot of kids in that 14 to 28-year-old demographic and say, hey, why do you shop at this store and not this store? Why do you like this person and not that, or this company, not that company? Because they know their brands and they only want to support brands that share their values and are doing something to make a difference. And so if 93% of them will only buy from companies that they respect and value, then they're watching your church too, and they're seeing what you respect and value. And if you guys don't share this same ideology, then they don't want to be a part of it, right? Or it's harder for them to feel like the church reflects who they are and who God has called them to be. Another shift that we've seen, I think for the first time ever, is, and I'm like a geriatric millennial, so I'm still not quite, I haven't fully embraced this, but especially Gen Z and Gen Alpha truly deeply believe that they can change the world and influence and impact the entire world from a very young age. So the whole influencers terminology, I got this off the web. An influencer is someone who impacts the behavior of others and has a following. And they think they can be influencers. They think that the world is watching them. Whether or not this is good or bad will determine, but bottom line is they don't think they have to grow up someday and advocate or legislate for change. They can be the change right now across the world. So Jesus was an influencer, right? So an influencer is not necessarily a bad thing, someone who impacts the behavior of others and has a following. It's just what message they're getting out there that they want others to follow that we should be concerned about, right? But so here are some positive examples of some influencers. We have Greta Thunberg, right? A Swedish girl. She's 20 years old now, I think, but when she was 15, she started protesting outside of Parliament in her country, ended up speaking before the United Nations, took a famous boat trip here to the States and other countries to continue to advocate for slowing down climate change, doing something to care for the environment. And she's led protests with over 1 million people in attendance and has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Then we have Malala here, phenomenal, amazing, right? She did actually get the Nobel Peace Prize. She's the youngest person ever to have done so at 17 years old. So she's like 26 years old now. But she's a human rights advocate for the education of women and children after being shot in the head heading home on a bus from school in Pakistan. And then these girls down here, I took this picture from an article in Nashville when I was living there back in 2020. So these 6 teenagers met on Twitter. Okay, they were all 14 to 16 years old at the time, had never met in person, didn't know each other, all lived in the Nashville area. And right after the murder of George Floyd, they got together and they said, we want to organize a protest on Twitter. So they met for the first time at the actual protest. It took them 5 days to plan it. Over 10,000 people showed up. It was a very peaceful protest. I was there. It was beautifully well done. And I mean, to look at these 14 to 16-year-olds like leading the way for this Black Lives Matter protest in March was really inspiring. Okay, so here are other influencers, right? For good or ill, these may or may not be names that you know, but you have PewDiePie, also known as Felix. Okay, he's also Swedish, so Swiss guy, in his mid-30s now, but when he was in his early 20s, so early 20s in college, YouTube has just become a thing, and he starts to record himself playing video games on YouTube. And over the next couple of years, he becomes, and I think still has the title of the most followed or most successful YouTuber ever. So he has 111 million subscribers. His videos have been viewed over 29 billion times. I think he makes somewhere between $5 and $15 million every year to do nothing now. People just watch the content that he posted over the last decade. I think he lives in Japan now and is married, but and he's been controversial. People have looked at some of his early videos and not appreciated kind of the harm they feel that he does to women or to others in them, but he's an influencer. He's making money, and these younger generations see this and they know that gamers can go on YouTube and make a ton of money. And Charli D'Amelio, she was a dancer, right? So loved to dance, 15 years old. She started on TikTok as that came out, and started doing dances, lip singing, just silly stuff. She's 19 now. She has over 100 million followers on TikTok. So she was like the very first one to break the 50 and 100 million follower levels. So now she has her own reality TV show. She was paid $1 million to be part of a Super Bowl ad for hummus. I mean, so again, like, these people are young, they're 15, right? And multimillionaires for creating content that's like dances and lip singing. And Elle over here, McBroom, is 6 years old. 6 years old. So I was talking with Dee Dee. So she does kind of have a momager, right? Because at 6, you're not really deciding. I think maybe at some point we'll look back and reflect on how much we exposed our minor children to social media with or without their consent, and if it's the kind of stuff they are proud of as they age, or perhaps not. I don't know. All I do know is Elle is already generating a ton of income at 6 years old with over 4 million followers on Instagram, where her mom primarily posts pictures of her cute outfits. Okay, so we know that young adults are not going to church because they don't think that we believe in what they believe in. They also don't think that what we're doing in church is going to influence them, influence their behavior or the world for good and in positive ways. And they're also not going to church because they don't really trust the church or the clergy leading churches. Lifeway did research in January of 2023 that found that only 20% of young adults believe pastors have high levels of honesty, compared to 30%, not much better, of 35 to 54-year-olds, and 46% of those 55 and older. So they just literally do not trust pastors. And you see all these scandals, right? You see all these things coming out on Netflix about the Duggars and about oh gosh, what's that? Hillsong churches and leadership, and we see the Catholic Church and the pedophilia cases, and Boy Scouts, all that kind of stuff. Like they don't feel they can trust the church because in the news they see that churches are places of harm to children and others. So that same Springtide group that kind of focuses on Gen Z research asked Gen Zers during the pandemic, where do you feel safe right now? And 29% felt safe at school, 22% at work, shopping, in public, 18% felt safe in the church. So if they don't want all those things, like what do young adults want? What are they looking for? Well, here's some more research I really want you to check out. It's a total report called the On Being Report from Sacred Design Labs. And Casper ter Kuile does a lot with this. He's like a Yale Divinity grad from the UK. Anyways, he did research with others and found that these are the 6 elements that young adults are looking for, primarily millennials, right? But I would say that Gen Z and Gen Alpha would also hope to find all of this in their faith community. And you might not be able to have all 6, but you could have at least 3, a minimum of 2, hopefully 3 or more of them. And he gave examples of like CrossFit, right? Our young adults are not at church, but they're at CrossFit. Why? Because it's a community, because people know each other and they all dress alike and they all hang out together. It's personal transformation, right? At CrossFit, they know they're getting buffed, they're losing weight, they're whatever, reaching their fitness goals. It's social transformation. CrossFit does a lot of competitions and they raise money for lots of nonprofits. It's about purpose finding. Creativity, maybe not so much at CrossFit, maybe with all the different workout things they do. And accountability is a big part of CrossFit too, right? Like they'll put your name up there and publicly if you haven't come for a month as a way of saying, hey, you made a commitment to do this. We want you to show up. So these are the things that our millennials are wanting from faith community, well, wanting from anything that they show up to and invest their lives in. Okay. Springtide research, so adding on to that, with more emphasis on what Gen Zers want, they did research that shows that young adults want churches or faith communities to be a place of curiosity and diversity. So Gen Alpha is going to be our most diverse generation ever to walk the face of the earth. And so they want diversity in their churches too. They want flexibility. Over 60% of those 40 and under have said they will never again go to in-person worship, according to Barna research. So they're not going to come every Sunday. They want to pick this small group or that choir cantata and this church softball league. They're just going to pick what they want when they want to, based on what's going on in their life, and what their needs are and what they feel they're gaining from investing their time in these other activities. So that's that unbundled element that they want. So it's not just about Sunday mornings. And here's some data from their report. 58% of young people say, I don't like to be told answers about faith. I want to discover my own answers. So instead of youth groups where, the youth pastor or whatever stands up and gives a 20-minute message, you need to do this, be this, a mini sermonette or whatever. They want to talk about it together. They want you to listen to what they think. And yes, offer thoughts and feedback, but it's more of a dialogue as opposed to a monologue when they're gathering in spaces. And 82% of young people say they love learning new things. So that's that curiosity element. And when you look at our Sunday mornings, a lot of times it's pretty predictable what's going to happen when, where, and how. And so there's not a lot of new things being introduced to them. Okay, so when it comes to do's and don'ts and things that we can be doing to reach folks, here are the don'ts, and then I'll dive into the do's. So don't pretend to be something that you aren't. I would say more than any other generation, our Gen Z and Gen Alpha especially, but perhaps millennials too, have a really good BS meter. And if you are not being authentic, they're going to see it. Like if you're trying to be edgy or say or do things that they know you're not really into, if you hate TikTok and are talking like the top influencers, or you've never played pickleball in your life, but you start a league and talk about how amazing it is, they know and they see through that. Like, be true to who you are. Don't think that adding a contemporary service is going to bring in young adults, because it won't. There are young adults that absolutely love traditional services. What they want more than anything else is for it to be authentic. Don't pressure them to join committees. They don't want to come into an institution they don't really trust and they think causes harm. Give them what we call in some Western jurisdiction gatherings, polity-free zones, where they can just think and be and explore without all the same rules and regulations, and then create spaces and conversations where they can influence committees or structure or bureaucracy, as they might call it. Don't separate them from the life of the church. A lot of young adults, one of their values at church is that they're able to be in intergenerational spaces. I mentioned this a little bit in our discussion on boomers. So we'll create spaces for a conversation and where they can not just show up on a Sunday morning and then be ushered out for children's church or youth group, but also read scripture or give a sermon or assist, in other ways besides running your soundboard in the back. Don't leave this work to the pastor. So the most effective way to reach these young adults, if they don't trust clergy, is to have your lay people making those connections, and don't wait, right? Like they're already aging out of faith, so to speak. So it's time to really engage them in meaningful ways. Okay, so 5 things that you can do to reach younger generations. And I'm sorry that, again, this is pre-recorded, so I can't pause and actually hear someone other than myself talk right now. But I'll dive into this finish and then email me, or we'll schedule other conversation dialogue opportunities in the future. Okay, 5 things we can do. Number 1, improve your online presence and plan. The number 1 way anyone under 40 is going to find your church is with their smartphone. So update your Google business account, because they're not going to Yelp for those reviews. So do you have a Google business account? Does it have pictures of outside and inside of your church? They want to see those. Does it have your current website? Does it have the correct address and business hours? Brady Shearer from Pro Church Tools has a really, really great podcast that just walks you through the basics of this, of how to fix your Google business account, if you want to check that out. And then have a plan to move from social to parasocial to in-person interactions with authentic interactions. So, yes, you're posting on social media. That's great. But how are you moving from just that post to creating a relationship where they feel like they see you or know you or can connect to you virtually through your IGTV or, your Instagram TV or your TikTok or whatever it might be. And then how do you move that to personal interactions through DMs or meeting up for coffee? Again, some of these kids are young, right? So do you have a safe sanctuary policy for online interactions? What is it? Or in-person interactions? So adhere to those policies, but also always have a plan. See social media as a funnel to get them engaged in the life of the church, and literally know what your steps are to accomplish that. All right, number 2, communicate in a way that resonates with them. So if young adults see themselves as a brand, for lack of a better word, they want to know what's in it for them. Like, I don't go to church just because I'm forced to. Or that's not a compelling reason to keep them in church for the rest of their lifetime. So when When my dad was assigned to the Naval Postgraduate School in California when I was in college, there was a professor there that always structured her lectures around these 3 questions. And they're the 3 questions that I use in all my sermons when I'm preaching. So anytime you're preaching, communicating to those under 40, try to follow this kind of layout, and it helps them to see the value and the transformation that we find in faith. So, when I'm talking to them, I start with what? What are we talking about? Are we talking about forgiveness? Are we talking about betrayal? Are we talking about communication or death or whatever it might be? What is it? So what? Why should I care? Why should I forgive? Why should I ask forgiveness? Right? So explain the so what, like, why does this matter? And don't be afraid to use data or science or what, like, data shows that people who refuse to forgive and hold on to grudges die 10 years sooner, or whatever it might be, right? We know there's scientific proof out there like that can help these young adults see, like, you will be a better holistically whole and well individual if you embrace faith and spirituality. And even those outside of Christianity, in the scientific fields, would adhere to that, right? The body, soul, mind connection. So what do I care? And now what do I do about it? So young adults really want a CTA, a call to action. Again, it's that influencer side of them. I want to change the world. So don't just preach about discrimination and racial inequality. Give them a chance to write a letter to their senator, or text someone about an upcoming protest or whatever it might be, that lets them feel like they can take what they've learned and apply it right away to changing the world and changing their world and their lives. Okay, number 3, go outside of the church walls to listen and love, not judge and nag. So if young adults are not coming to us in our pews, we need to go to them. John 3:16 is a verse near and dear to the heart of many, many Christians, but I think we misunderstand what God is really saying there, right? Or what we're reading in John 3:16, where it says, "For God so loved the world that he gave the church to the world out of love for all God's creation." Instead, we like to think that what it really says is, "For God so loved the church that he gave the world to the church so that the world would just come in and be a part of us." Well, that's not John 3:16. We are there to go and love the world. God loves the world. And if they're not in the church, then we need to be where they are. So talk to your kids, talk to your grandkids, engage in the community, volunteer to be at the football stand selling tickets or concessions, create spaces where you can form friendships. I absolutely love the ASU students I got to meet my first year here in Phoenix, and the dinners that we would have together and the hikes that we would go on. So go to where they are, engage in the community. And number 4, rethink church rhythms for your young adult members. Okay, they're not going to church every Sunday when they're adults. They're probably not going now. So do not focus on Sunday mornings being the time where they are discipled. It needs to be a rhythm of everyday discipleship. Have ways to engage them 24/7 through your social media, through different resources on the web, or different relationships in the church, so that they know following Christ is not something that happens for an hour on Sunday, but it's all day, every day. It's a way of being. They also don't want to be mentored. They want to be heard as well. So create those opportunities for mutual mentorship to occur. They want to ask questions. They want to grow in confidence and identity. So they have a lot to say, but they don't always have the confidence to know who they are and if they're just as beautiful without a filter. So help build that up in them, because they need that. And so this would be like another way to do this, is to really, really normalize the mental health crisis going on in the world, like in our preaching and our teaching and anything that we do. Naming the fact that a lot of us are not okay. I mean, as we look at these younger generations, they're some of the most anxious generations that we've ever seen. And part of it might be all that impact of social media and the constant comparing to others. I'm not as pretty. I don't have as many friends. I don't have as many followers. I didn't eat a dinner that's Instagram worthy, whatever it might be. So they can be really insecure, and they can really struggle with who they are and their self-worth. So that impacts their mental health. So offering resources there, having small small groups or groups for parents, especially, right? Let's have parents get together and talk about how to help our kids who are struggling with eating disorders or with their image in some way. And then they don't always trust clergy. So have discipleship opportunities that are lay-led by laity who, again, are not going to judge and nag, but will really listen and engage in that mutual mentorship stuff. Okay, and number 5 is pray, right? Like we have a lot of praying to do, and I really believe in the power of prayer, and it opens us up to tell God, I have no idea what I'm doing, and I don't know who should be leading this, and I don't know where to find young adults, like guide me, help me. We're not alone in this. So be people of prayer. I love Philippians 4, that says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. So let's be people of prayer. All right. And then, I do have this book. I have free copies for you if you want it. Now, this will walk you through, if you are a layperson that wants to engage in intergenerational or young adult kind of ministry, and you don't know how to do that, like how to listen and learn from the community, and then how to start to love and serve and gather people and come up with a discipleship and worship plan for whatever it is you're doing. This is for non-Sunday centric, non-building centric ministry. This book might help you with that. And then here are links to a lot of the data that I put up there so that you can go deeper and learn more. So I will save those other slides for another time together, but I'm going, okay, I'm still recording, but I stopped sharing. I just want to thank you all again for being a part of the presentation on how to reach folks under 40, the whys, the do's, the don'ts. If you have any questions or need any other resources or would like other Monday moment topics, feel free to email me at rgilmore@dscumc.org. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.